I never imagined that moving to Paris for my studies would lead to one of the most complicated situations of my life. At 25, I had just begun my master's program in French literature at one of the most prestigious universities in the city. Paris was everything I had dreamed of: romantic, vibrant, full of life. It was supposed to be a new chapter, a fresh start. Little did I know that this city of love would entangle me in a web of emotions that I never saw coming. My name is Camille, and I grew up in a small town in the south of France. Moving to Paris was like stepping into another world. The bustling streets, the beautiful architecture, the sense of history, it was overwhelming and exhilarating. I was thrilled to be here, living in a tiny apartment in the Latin Quarter, immersing myself in my studies, and meeting people from all walks of life. One of the people I met was Professor Julien Moreau. He was 48, a distinguished man with a reputation for being one of the best professors in the university. With his salt and pepper hair, sharp jawline, and piercing blue eyes, he had a presence that commanded respect. He was charming, intelligent, and completely captivating in the way he spoke about literature.
It was impossible not to be drawn to him.
At first, I admired him from a distance. He was always professional, always focused on the subject matter, but there was something about the way he looked at me during lectures, something in the way his eyes would linger on mine just a little longer than necessary, that made my heart race. The turning point came one evening after a particularly intense seminar. Most of the students had already left, but I stayed behind to ask him a few questions about the material we had covered. The classroom was quiet, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the wooden desks. "Professor Moreau," I began, trying to keep my voice steady as I approached him. "I was wondering if you could help me with some of the themes in Baudelaire's work. I'm having a bit of trouble understanding his use of symbolism." He looked up from his papers, a small smile playing on his lips. "Of course, Camille. I'd be happy to help. Why don't you sit down?" I took a seat near his desk, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to focus on the questions I had prepared. But as he started explaining the intricacies of Baudelaire's poetry, I found it increasingly difficult to concentrate. His voice was deep and smooth, with just a hint of a Parisian accent, and the way he spoke about the text made it feel as though we were sharing a secret, something intimate and personal. As the discussion went on, I noticed a shift in his tone, a subtle change in the way he was looking at me. His eyes were no longer just focused on the text in front of us. They were focused on me. I could feel the tension building between us, a tension that was both thrilling and terrifying. "Camille," he said suddenly, his voice lower now, "you have a remarkable understanding of these themes. But I sense there's something more you're not saying. Something you're holding back." I swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. I'm not sure what you mean, Professor." He leaned in slightly, his gaze intense. "Literature is about more than just words on a page. It's about emotion, about the human experience. I can tell you're passionate about this subject, but there's something deeper, isn't there?" My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know how to answer him, didn't know what to do with the way he was looking at me. I suppose I've always been drawn to the darker, more complex aspects of literature," I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. He smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent shivers down my spine. "That's good, Camille. It means you're not afraid to explore the complexities of the human soul. But be careful, sometimes getting too close to the darkness can consume you." I nodded, unsure of what to say. There was something in his words, in the way he was looking at me, that felt like a warning but also like an invitation. An invitation to step into that darkness with him, to explore something forbidden and dangerous. "I should probably go," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's getting late." He didn't move, didn't look away. "You don't have to go, Camille. We could continue our discussion over a glass of wine, if you'd like. I find that Baudelaire is best understood with a bit of good Bordeaux." My heart skipped a beat. I knew what he was suggesting, knew that this was crossing a line that should never be crossed. But the temptation was too strong, the allure of what he was offering too irresistible. "I don't think that would be appropriate," I said, trying to sound firm, but my voice betrayed me, wavering with uncertainty. He stood up slowly, walking around the desk to stand in front of me. He was so close now that I could feel the warmth of his body, smell the faint scent of his cologne, woodsy and sophisticated. Appropriate, he echoed, his voice soft and compelling. Perhaps not, but sometimes the most memorable experiences in life are those that defy convention. Okay, I said, my voice barely audible. One glass of wine. He smiled, his eyes lighting up with satisfaction. That's all I ask. He led me to a small, private office adjacent to the classroom, a space I had never seen before. It was dimly lit, with shelves lined with books and a large window that looked out over the city. The Eiffel Tower glittered in the distance, a perfect backdrop to the scene unfolding before me. He poured 2 glasses of wine, handing one to me as he took a seat on the leather sofa. I hesitated for a moment, then sat down beside him, my heart pounding in my chest. The wine was rich and smooth, warming me from the inside out, but it did little to calm my nerves. We talked about literature, about Paris, about life. But the conversation was different now, more intimate, more charged with the unspoken tension between us. I could feel his eyes on me, could sense the shift in the air as the night grew darker. "Camille," he said suddenly, setting his glass down and turning to face me, "you're a remarkable woman. Intelligent, beautiful, passionate. You deserve to be cherished, to be seen for who you truly are." I felt a blush rise to my cheeks, and I looked down at my hands, unsure of how to respond. "Thank you, Professor," I murmured, my voice shaky. I looked up at him, my heart racing, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. This was wrong, I knew it was. He was my professor, nearly twice my age, and I was his student. But the way he was looking at me, the way he was making me feel, it was something I had never experienced before. "I don't know," I whispered, my voice trembling. "This could get us both in a lot of trouble." He smiled, a slow, seductive smile that made my pulse quicken. "Only if we let it. But if we're careful, if we keep this between us, no one ever has to know." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I knew I should walk away, should end this now before it went any further. But I couldn't bring myself to move. I was drawn to him, to the danger of what he was offering, and I found myself nodding, agreeing to something I knew I shouldn't. It was a kiss filled with longing, with a desire that had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks. And as much as I knew it was wrong, as much as I knew I should stop, I couldn't bring myself to do it. The thrill of the forbidden, the excitement of stepping into uncharted territory, it was too powerful to resist. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathing heavily, our hearts pounding in unison. I stared at him, my mind a whirlwind of emotions, guilt, desire, confusion. "Julian, we can't," I whispered, my voice trembling. "This is wrong." "I know," he replied, his hand still resting on my cheek, his thumb gently stroking my skin. "But I don't regret it. Do you?" I looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of doubt, but all I saw was sincerity. He meant every word, and that terrified me. Because the truth was, I didn't regret it either. But that didn't make it right. "We have to stop," I said, my voice firmer this time. "We can't keep doing this. It's not fair to either of us." Julian nodded, his expression pained. "You're right. But that doesn't change how I feel about you. I care about you too," I admitted, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "But this isn't right. We have to keep things professional." He sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I understand. But know that I'm here for you, no matter what." The days that followed were a mix of tension and restraint. Julian kept his distance, maintaining a professional demeanor during class, but I could feel the tension between us, the pull that had been growing stronger with each passing day. And as much as I tried to focus on my studies, on my life in Paris, I couldn't stop thinking about that kiss, about the way Julian had made me feel. Then, one evening, after a particularly long day, I received a message from him. It was simple, direct. "I need to see you. Can you meet me in my office?" My heart raced as I read the message. I knew I should ignore it, should keep my distance, but the temptation was too strong. I found myself walking through the empty corridors of the university, my footsteps echoing in the silence as I made my way to his office. When I arrived, the The door was slightly ajar, and I hesitated for a moment before pushing it open. Julian was standing by the window, his back to me, his hands clasped behind his back. The city lights twinkled in the distance, casting a soft glow over the room. "You came," he said, his voice low and filled with emotion. "I shouldn't have," I replied, closing the door behind me. "But I couldn't stay away." He turned to face me, his expression conflicted. "Camille, I've tried to fight this, but I can't. I care about you more than I should. This isn't just a passing infatuation. It's something real." My heart ached at his words, and I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "Julian, we can't do this. It's too dangerous. You're my professor, and I'm your student. If anyone found out—" "No one has to find out," he interrupted, stepping closer. "We can keep this between us. But I can't let you walk away without knowing how I feel." I looked up at him, my vision blurred by tears. "I don't want to lose you, Julian. But I also don't want to ruin your career, your life." He reached out and gently wiped away a tear that had escaped down my cheek. "I'm willing to take that risk, if it means being with you." The room seemed to close in around us, the air thick with tension and unspoken emotions. I knew I was standing at a crossroads, that I had to make a choice, either walk away and try to salvage my life, or give in to the feelings that had been growing between us. Before I could make a decision, Julian closed the distance between us and kissed me again, this time with more urgency, more passion. My resolve crumbled, and I kissed him back, my hands tangling in his hair as I pulled him closer. The next few hours were a blur of emotions: desire, guilt, fear. We gave in to the attraction that had been simmering beneath the surface, losing ourselves in the moment. It was exhilarating, but it was also wrong, and I knew that the consequences would be dire. When it was over, we lay together on the sofa, the reality of what we had done slowly sinking in. I felt a deep sense of guilt, of regret, but I also felt a strange sense of fulfillment, as if I had found something that had been missing from my life for so long. But that sense of fulfillment was short-lived, as the weight of our actions began to settle over me like a dark cloud. How could I continue my studies, knowing what had happened between us? How could I face him in class, knowing that we had crossed a line that should never have been crossed? As if sensing my turmoil, Julian reached out and took my hand, his touch warm and comforting. "Camille, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "But we've made a mess of things, Julian. I don't know how to fix this." "We'll figure it out," he said softly, his thumb gently stroking the back of my hand. "I'm here for you, no matter what." But his words offered little comfort. The reality of our situation was too overwhelming, and I knew that there were no easy answers, no quick fixes. We had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The days that followed were some of the most difficult of my life. I tried to act normal, to focus on my studies, but the guilt was eating me alive. Every time I saw Julian in class, I felt like a fraud, like I was living a lie. And the worst part was, I couldn't bring myself to end things with him. Despite the guilt, despite the fear, I couldn't let go of the connection we had. But the longer our affair went on, the more complicated things became. The lies, the secrets, they were tearing me apart, and I knew that it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. That moment came one afternoon, when I overheard a conversation between two of my classmates. They were talking about rumors, whispers about a relationship between a student and a professor. My heart sank as I realized they were talking about Julian and me.
Panic set in.
If the rumors spread, it would be the end of everything. For Julian's career, for my studies, for the fragile connection we had built. I knew I had to do something, had to find a way to stop the rumors before they spiraled out of control. I confronted Julian that evening, my heart pounding with fear. "Julian, people are talking. If this gets out..." He looked at me, his expression serious. "I know, Camille. I've heard the rumors too. We have to be careful. But what if it's too late?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What if the damage is already done?" He reached out and took my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We'll handle it together. We won't let this ruin us." But as much as I wanted to believe him, the fear gnawed at me, growing stronger with each passing day. The rumors didn't go away. In fact, they seemed to grow, fueled by whispers and speculation. I could feel the walls closing in around us, the pressure mounting until it was unbearable. In the end, I knew that I had to make a choice. I had to protect myself, my future, even if it meant walking away from the man I had grown to care for so deeply. With a heavy heart, I made the decision to leave Paris, to transfer to another university far away from the scandal that was threatening to destroy us both. It was the hardest decision I had ever made, but I knew it was the right one. On my last night in the city, I met Julian one final time. We stood on the Pont des Arts, the lights of the city reflecting off the Seine as we said our goodbyes. There were no words that could capture the depth of my emotions, the pain of leaving behind the man I had fallen for, but I knew it was the only way. "Take care of yourself, Camille," Julian said softly, his voice filled with regret. "I'll never forget you." "I'll never forget you either," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "But this is goodbye." As I walked away from him, from Paris, from the life I had built, I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't the ending I had hoped for, but it was the ending I needed. And as much as it hurt, I knew that I was doing the right thing for both of us.